Good afternoon. I'm Kyle Stripling, President of Galloway Insurance in Burnett and an IAT board member. Thanks for joining us for another virtual InsureCon session. I hope you enjoyed the other sessions with Steve Anderson and the E&O panel. If you missed them, all the virtual InsureCon sessions are recorded and will be available on iiat.org on Monday. Before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. First, I want to extend my thanks to IIT's lead underwriters for making virtual InsureCon possible. It is because of their generosity that this program is available for free to members. So let's thank Texas Mutual Insurance Company, Union Standard Insurance Group, UFG, Allied Trust, Central Insurance Companies, Service Lloyds, Liberty Mutual Insurance, Safeco Insurance, Imperial PFS, Travelers, State Auto Insurance Companies, Nationwide, Swiss Re, and IIAT Advantage E&O and Markets. I also want to tell you about 3 new webinars that IIAT Angela Fords will be presenting starting in July. The first, practical strategies to avoid potential E&O based on agency service standards. Second, know your agency data and workflows. And third, using technology and tools to stay focused on agency customer experiences. Look for the details for these 3 new webinars in your inbox. And finally, tomorrow at 10 a.m., IIAT Advantage endorsed cyber liability provider, Wingman, will be hosting a free webinar for IIAT members titled, How to Compare Cyber Coverage. Look for details from IIAT in your inbox following this webinar. Our speaker this afternoon is Mike Devlin. Mike is head of engineering at ePayPolicy, a company that specializes in helping insurance agencies accept credit card and ACH payments online. Before that, he had roles as senior development at Tiger Pistol and GeoSearch. It's my pleasure to welcome Mike Devlin.
Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure and honor to be here. I hope everyone's doing well today. The title of my talk today is Turning Your Agency into Fort Knox. And so the purpose of this talk is to discuss digital security and some practical steps that you can take to keep your data safe. When I discuss digital security, I really like to explain the why as well as the what. I think it's important to understand why you do certain things in order to, and how that makes your system safe. So we're going to go into a lot of specifics today. As was mentioned, my name is Mike Devlin. I'm the head of engineering at ePayPolicy. Our platform is a platform that allows you to accept digital payments on your website very quickly and easily, whether that's an ACH payment or a credit card payment. We do invoice reminders and automatic payments. I'd be thrilled to talk to you about it after the webinar if you're interested, and we can go over the product, or you can visit our website at ePayPolicy.com. So as I mentioned, this is going to be a somewhat technical talk, and I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you all at once. Some of it's going to get a little deep in the weeds, but I think it's important to just kind of take a step back and sort of look at what we're going to talk about today. If there's 3 takeaways that I could give you that you can take away from this program and implement, I think that these 3 things will go a long way, even if you forget everything else I say in this talk. So I'd just like to kind of give those 3 things to you now, and then as the talk progresses, we'll touch on all 3 of these. The first one is to choose strong, unique passwords. It's very important to make your password secure anytime you sign up for any kind of login or sign up page on any kind of website. The second is to use 2-factor authentication whenever it's possible and available. If you don't know what 2-factor authentication is, we'll go over that in this talk. And the third one is to exercise a healthy dose of skepticism. So with that, I will get right into it. So in talks about digital security, it's very important to discuss what we are trying to protect. And the obvious answer is data. We're trying to protect data. But what kind of data are we trying to protect, and what is the scope of that? And it goes a little further than you would think. So let's kind of just itemize some of the things that are really important that we keep either confidential and or safe. And the first is clients' financial information. ePayPolicy is a payment processor, so we process ACH payments and credit card numbers, and there are a lot of rules and restrictions that go into the handling of that data. You may be familiar with PCI. PCI is a set of rules that are implemented to describe the minimum security protections that you have in place in order to handle credit card data. It's an organization that was formed by the credit card companies, MasterCard, Visa, American Express, Discover, and every company that handles credit card information is required to go through this audit process once a year to make sure that they are following the minimum security restrictions. A lot of those restrictions apply to you, even if you don't make yourself PCI certified, and we'll touch on that in just a moment. So it's important to keep that information safe. So the client's financial information and their payment information, those credit card numbers and ACH numbers, routing numbers, account numbers. Operational data. Operational data is the data that you use on a day-to-day basis in order to run your business. This is not always confidential information, but it's data that if it were deleted or destroyed, would severely impact your business. For example, if a hacker broke into your email server and deleted all of your emails and your calendar appointment reminders, that would be a huge inconvenience, to say the least, and would possibly, make it would possibly like shut you down for a couple of days while you get that data back. So that's operational data that's not necessarily secure, not necessarily confidential, but missing that data, or if that data was suddenly taken away, would severely hamper your ability to carry out business. Company secrets, this is kind of an umbrella term, and it just varies from company to company. In a lot of companies, this could be your trade agreements that you have in place, or just certain contract negotiations that have taken place. In a lot of cases, it's source code to the software. If you've ever had a developer, or if you have an on-staff developer that writes code for your company, you probably know that source code is not cheap. It takes, it's expensive to have a developer write code for you. So if that information was stolen, that's an expense that you've lost. And having that source code stolen can impact you in two other ways that may not be obvious. The first is that your source code provides you with a competitive advantage over your competitors. So if that source code was stolen by a competitor, then suddenly your competitive advantage is gone. And so it's important that you keep that information locked down. The other reason is that if there is some kind of payment processing or just some kind of confidential data that's being handled with your system, a hacker could take the source code and analyze it, searching for vulnerabilities, and use that to attack the software. So it's very important that you keep the source code safe, and that's why I include it under the umbrella of company secrets. And finally, it's the last item up here is personal identity information. You've probably heard of this PII. It's actually personally identifiable information. It just didn't fit on this slide. In general, this is considered the combination of a person's name, physical address or mailing address, and email. You can also lump social security number in there, or any other information that can uniquely identify someone. There's two reasons that you want to keep this information safe. The first is that people use this information to harvest information and collect data about individuals and use them to sort of violate their privacy. So if you can connect a person that's in this database to some other database that may be out there, then you can start to accumulate information about them. So for example, if someone infiltrated the database within your organization and downloaded your client database and then was able to match that up to, say, I don't know, if they infiltrated Netflix, they could figure out their viewing history or something like that. So there's privacy implications of keeping that information secure. And the other is because, and this particularly involves associates or employees that you work with, but in certain domestic situations, you may have an employee who's suffering harassment or even violence, or some kind of situation that they're trying to escape from, who keeping this information secure is keeping them safe. this is kind of just the obvious rules that you would never give somebody's phone number over the phone to somebody who requests it, like somebody's home phone number or something along those lines. That keeps that person physically safe. And so that's another reason you'd want to keep this information secure. So these are all of the types of data that we are trying to protect with the security practices that we put into place. So I mentioned payment data and payment information on the previous slide, and so I kind of want to go over some of the PCI regulations that may apply to you. The PCI spec for the security that a person has to follow if they're handling credit card data is that spec is quite long and very, very, very thorough. It mostly applies to whatever the application is that you're doing. So if you are accepting credit cards, for example, in a retail scenario where the card is being handed to you, there's certain restrictions that apply to you versus one where if you have a website and you're accepting it over your website. But for the most part, you don't have to worry about that. But what you do have to worry about is when somebody gives you a credit card number over the phone or just through some other digital means. And so I'd like to kind of touch on some of the rules that may apply to you when that type of thing occurs. So the first is to never send cardholder data by email or chat. Email and chat are considered insecure forms of communication. If a hacker breaks into your email, they can see the credit card number that was sent, or if they break into the recipient's email account, they can also see that credit card information. There are also ways to eavesdrop on that information when it's in transit, and so it's considered bad practice, and it is a PCI violation to transmit any kind of payment information by email or chat. The second is to never write down cardholder data if you can help it at all. At ePayPolicy, we have a rule that we hold on to the credit card information for as short of a time as possible for it to serve its business function, and then we immediately destroy it. So if someone gives you a credit card number over the phone and you're forced to write it down, do whatever you need to do with that credit card information immediately and then shred that piece of paper as quickly as you can. Holding on to credit card information is a liability. It is something that puts you at risk of that data being stolen. And so it's important just to get rid of it as quickly as you can, just so that you're absolved from that liability. So if at all possible, never write down cardholder data. If you do have to physically retain credit card information for whatever reason, there's lots of rules that are in place for you, but they all kind of boil down to never leaving cardholder data just unattended. It's bad practice to write down a credit card number that you accept over the phone and then leave it on your desk as you go for a cup of coffee or to run an errand or something like that, because someone could walk by your desk and just take it. In some more egregious practices I've seen, I actually worked for a company that did this, where they kept credit card information in a Rolodex, and that's considered that's a no-no. That should be kept in a locked container, a secure locked container like a file cabinet or a safe or something along those lines to keep that information from being stolen. But I go back to the second rule. You really just don't want to hold on to it. If at all possible, just get rid of it as quickly as you can. There's a lot of online services that will store that information for you in what's called a token. And so the way that those tokenization services work is that you send them the credit card information and then they send you back a unique token. And that unique token can only be used with that vendor that you sent the credit card to. So if those tokens are stolen by some hacker or just anybody, the only thing that they can do with that token is to take your client's money and then pay you. And they can't steal the money for themselves. They can't use it to buy things on Walmart or whatever. The only thing that token is good for would be to fund your account. And so those tokens are considered safe and you can keep them on premise without any kind of restrictions in place. So this kind of just wraps up how to handle credit card data. If possible, just release yourself from it as quickly as possible so that you're relieved of that liability. And now I'd like to kind of discuss some of the ways that information is stolen from your organization or your digital systems and just the different methods that hackers use and what they do once they have infiltrated it. So the first one I'd like to discuss is called malware. So malware is an umbrella term that kind of refers to a lot of different pieces of software. In general, the three that we think of as malware are ransomware, viruses, and worms. Malware just simply means bad software, mal software. And they mostly, for the most part, fall under those three categories. What malware can do, it's up on the screen here. It can steal data. So if a attacker were to install a piece of malware on your systems, it could surreptitiously eavesdrop on information that's going around the network and send that to an unknown third party. It could cause data destruction. This is probably what you think of when you think of a virus from maybe like the 90s or the early 2000s, where a virus makes it onto your system and then it just starts deleting files. This is, a data destruction type scenario that malware can cause. And the third one, which is really important because there's been an uptick of this in the last couple of years, is called ransomware. The way that ransomware works is that it works through the same mechanisms that a virus or a worm does, in that it finds a way that onto your system, and then it begins looking around your system for anything that looks important. So you may be infected with ransomware for a few days and not even know it because it hasn't done anything. All it's doing is just kind of looking around your system. And then finally, what it'll do is, after it's kind of created a catalog of all the things that look important on your computer, it'll immediately encrypt those files, delete the originals, and then pop a message up on your screen. And the message will say something to the effect of, "You've been infected by XYZ ransomware. Your files are encrypted. In order to recover your files, you have to send so many Bitcoins to some guy in Eastern Europe." And so at that point, your options are kind of limited. One thing you can do is, if you do have backups, you can recover the data from backup, and hopefully that will, alleviate the ransomware attack. But if you don't have data backups, then you're really don't have any other option besides either paying the ransom. So you could pay the ransom to this third party and hope that they send you back the decryption key to recover your files, or just lose the data. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of high-profile cases recently where the affected party ended up having to pay the ransom. Some of the high-profile ones are, there was a hospital, I believe, in the Midwest, who lost a lot of patient records. And then I believe the city of Baltimore had their systems infected and were brought down for about a week or two, and ended up paying the ransom in order to recover their files. So it's very important that you keep backups, and that you prevent this malware from reaching your system in the first place. So how do we do that? How do we avoid malware from reaching your system? Well, in order to kind of answer that question, we have to sort of explain how these pieces of malware actually make it onto your system. And there's usually two ways. One of the ways you've probably have heard, because you've probably received this advice for many, many years now, of not taking any kind of floppy disk or kind of storage media and plugging it into your computer if you don't trust it. So the way that we see this these days is through USB keys. If a person gives you a USB key to plug into your computer, it's possible that it's infected with malware and could infect your computer if you do plug it in. There's even been cases where the manufacturers of USB keys had their systems hacked, to where malware was installed on the USB key, and so anybody who purchased that USB key actually infected their system. That's extremely rare. That's a very extreme case, so I don't want to worry you with that, but that is just kind of an explanation of how far this can go if we're not careful. Another one is through email attachments. We should be very careful about the email attachments that we receive. If you receive an unsolicited email attachment, a PDF or a zip file or somewhere, and especially an executable, it may not hurt to just reach out to the person and say, hey, did you send me this, or was this meant for me, or something along, just confirming that this attachment is something that was meant to be sent. Um, you'd want to do that before you actually try to download and run those files. Um, we had a recent case where a PDF file was actually infected with a virus. The antivirus caught it, so we were okay, but even a PDF file is something that you would have to look out for. That could be infected with malware. So those are the two ways that kind of fall under the umbrella of the user doing something to bring the malware onto their computer. The other ways that malware can make it onto your computer is not necessarily through some user action. And in general, the way that these work is through some kind of vulnerability in the software that you use. So for example, there may be a bug in the browser that you use where just by going to a certain website, the owner of that website can upload a file or some computer code onto your computer and run it, which would then infect your computer with malware. Windows updates, it's the same way, or just Windows can also be affected this way. If there is a bug in Windows that allows an attacker to, some kind of security bug that allows an attacker to upload code to your machine, that would allow them to infect your computer with malware. So now that we've kind of described the mechanics of how malware spreads, let's discuss the prevention methods. So the first is to install software updates when they become available. This is very important. Browsers, for the most part, update themselves nowadays. Basically, they just update themselves in the background. When you shut down your browser and roll it back up, it automatically updates itself if there is an update available. And Chrome, in fact, will actually nag you if there is a update ready and say, hey, can you just close Chrome and reopen it so that we can launch this update. Windows is a little bit more of it's a little bit more of a pain, if we're being honest. You've probably received those Windows updates. I'm going to install a Windows update at the dead of night or something like that. They're making an effort to make it more convenient, but even still, in a lot of cases, what'll happen is you install an update and you can't use your computer for an hour or so while it's updating. Unfortunately, that is very unfortunate and it is very inconvenient, but it is important that you install those updates when they become available, because a lot of those updates that they are installing are actually to plug security holes that have been found before some kind of attacker uses them against you to upload malware to your computer. The second is to use antivirus software. You no longer have to purchase this, at least for Windows. I'm not sure about Mac, but for Windows, Windows now comes with its own antivirus software installed. It's called Windows Defender. If you've purchased a Dell or some other computers, occasionally those computers will come pre-installed with some kind of paid antivirus software, particularly McAfee. So the way it works is that you purchase a new laptop and it says, hey, you're getting a free trial of McAfee antivirus. And you're like, great, that's awesome. And then after 3 months, they say, okay, you need to pay now. And then you get those nag screens that, encourage you to pay, and it stops downloading updates and says your system is unsecure and all of that. You don't have to pay that. You can just uninstall that software and just enable Windows Defender. And Windows Defender is great. I've used it for years and it's fine. And I'll actually show you in a moment how to enable it within Windows. The other is to enable a firewall. So that the way a firewall works is that a firewall shuts down uninvited network connections that try to connect to your machine. So if there are any attackers that are trying to connect to your machine to see if they can try to upload a piece of malware or just any sort of code that you don't want on your computer, a firewall would stop them. Windows also comes with the firewall, so and it's enabled by default. And I actually think that if you don't enable the firewall, it'll not only will it give you a nag screen, but it'll sort of give you a message, something along the lines of, okay, we'll let you keep the firewall off for an hour, but then after that, we're just going to re-enable it without asking. So it's important that you keep that enabled. There's really no reason to keep it disabled. It's very important to have that software. So to reach these settings in Windows, if you just click the Start menu and type in Security, in Windows Security, you have this virus and threat protection right here. I'm using Trend Micro just because I purchased it a while ago, not because I didn't like Windows Defender. It was just it was something for my business when I was consulting. But Windows Defender is great. I encourage it. You also have firewall and network protection here. You can see firewall is on, firewall is on, firewall is on. That's all you need to do in order to enable it. So Windows makes it very easy. Just go to the Start menu and type in security, and you'll reach this screen in order to enable your firewall and your antivirus. Backups. So especially in the situation of ransomware, but also with worms and with viruses, it's important to have backups so that you can recover data if it's lost. And even outside of the context of security, it's important to have backups because hardware fails, disk drives fail, laptops get stolen. There's 100 reasons that data could just be lost, accidental deletion. So it's very important to keep backups. There's two forms of backups. One is a physical backup, something like you have an external hard drive that's beside your computer and it backs your data up to that. And the other is a cloud backup. And cloud backup is a software that you would buy and install on your computer, and every night it will upload any changed files up to a cloud service. Carbonite's probably the most famous one, and coincidentally, if you guys read Wirecutter, they just published an article yesterday about the best online cloud backup service. And their pick is this Backblaze, which I have never heard or used before, but it looks like it's good, and the price is very reasonable. It's only $60 per year. So I would encourage you to implement some kind of backup solution for your organization to prevent against data loss, whether it's malicious in the form of malware or something along those lines, or just accidental in terms of accidental deletion or hardware failure or something like that. One other solution that you can do is also to make all of your data live in the cloud. So if you use a service like Office 365 or OneDrive or G Suite, then that information lives in Google and you can just work with it there. For the most part, this works. It is, there are some scenarios where an attacker could just delete your whole account and then you would lose the data. But in general, it's not a bad idea to do that. What's nice about both OneDrive and G Suite offer this functionality that you can actually see version histories of a particular file. So if you're working on a file, you can see all of the revisions that you've made to a file. And this is good in the situations where somebody vandalizes your file or something like that, that you can just restore it to a version that was good and use that version instead of the vandalized one. And you can also recover deleted files from a trash bin type the service within both of those services. So using the cloud is a pretty good solution too if you don't do any sort of file storage locally. Phishing. So we're back to the ways that hackers infiltrate your systems, and the next topic is phishing. So phishing is one of those things that I think, it's this is going to be kind of a geeky thing to say, but it's one of those things that kind of keeps me up at night because I don't know how many people are aware of it, and it's very, very easy to fall victim to this type of thing. What phishing is it is when someone tricks a victim into giving up confidential information using some kind of digital means, whether that's email or phone or chat or something along those lines. Typically, the way that it works is that the attacker presents themselves and convinces the victim that they are some kind of trusted party. And I'll kind of go over the mechanics of how that works in a moment. So that's what phishing is. So they may trick you into giving up your passwords or credit card information, something like that, to an attacker who will then use it for a nefarious purpose. Why do hackers do it? So most phishing attacks usually involve accessing somebody's email account. And so there's two reasons that they might do that. One is to read confidential emails or to perhaps steal those emails and publish them to embarrass the person or embarrass the person's clients. And the other reason is because gaining access to one email system in general allows them to gain access to many more. And so here's how that works. So uh, if you're like me, most of your work accounts are probably set up with your work email address. So if you've created an account with your bank or with some kind of payment processor or something like that, you probably used your work email as your login, or at least just tied it to that account. So if an attacker broke into my email, what they could do is then go to that third-party service and do a password reset, which would then hit my inbox, and then the attacker would click the link and reset the password to something that they wanted. And then from there, they have access to that third-party system. This is surprisingly easy to do for two reasons. One is that they could just do it in the dead of night when, you may think, well, I'll just get the push notification on my phone and I'll know that something's up. If they do it in the dead of night when you're asleep, you might miss the push notification. The other way is that they just watch the inbox, they do the password reset, they watch your inbox. As soon as the email comes in, they immediately delete it so you don't get the push notification, and then they click the link. So that would allow them to access any sort of third party that you may have tied to that email address. But it actually goes further because there's a lot of services that you don't even have to do a password reset in order to access them. So there's a phone service called Ring Central that a lot of companies use for their phones. Where all you have to do is, if you have a Google account, you just click on this little button and it will allow you to log in without entering a password or anything like that. Slack is the same way. You just click the sign in with Google button, and all of a sudden you are accessing the company Slack messages that are going back and forth. And so if there's any payment information that's being transmitted back and forth, or if there's company secrets, deals, whatever kind of thing might be discussed on the network, those could be divulged to some third party. In the case of Ring Central, they could eavesdrop on conversations and listen for credit card numbers that may be transmitted over the phone. There's a lot of different things that they could do with once they access those services. So it's important that you keep your email secure and make sure that it's safe so that an attacker can't reach these third-party systems. So I kind of mentioned that I was going to go over the mechanics of how a phishing attack worked. And the example that I have is a little bit emotionally sensitive. It involves the 2016 election. And so I'm just going to kind of say this, and uh, I just ask that, you put aside your feelings for what happened in 2016 and just sort of look at this objectively and think about what this could mean for your organization and how this could work if this kind of attack was launched against you. So in 2016, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager was a man named John Podesta. And Hillary's campaign was using Gmail to correspond information about the campaign, TV appearances, and how they were going to respond to this, that, and the other thing. And just that's what they were using to correspond. And John received a phishing email that you can see on your screen right here that unfortunately was effective. So I'm just going to kind of read it for you. Subject, someone has your password. And the password, this is sort of just the text of the email. It looked much more legitimate when it came to his inbox. Subject, someone has your password. Hi, John. Someone just used your password to sign in to your Google account, john.podesta@gmail.com. Details, and it gives the date and the IP address, and the location is Ukraine. And so you can kind of imagine John would think, oh my goodness, Ukraine, that's definitely suspicious. That definitely wasn't me. Who's trying to access my account from Ukraine? Yeah, that's very suspicious. Google stopped this sign-in attempt. Okay, well, thank gosh. You should change your password immediately, and then it gave a link to change the password. Unfortunately, that link did not take the person to Google servers. It took it to a third-party service. So just to sort of illustrate how this worked. So here you have John Podesta. Here you have Google with a Gmail account. And here you have an attacker or a hacker with a web server. So John receives this email saying someone has tried to access your account. Click here to change your password. So he clicks the link and he's taken to a page that looks exactly like Google's password reset page. And you could probably have the two pages side by side and would not see any noticeable difference. It was that convincing that it was Google's page. And the URL probably looked very similar to a Google URL. I mean, if he had scrutinized it, he might have noticed that there was something kind of funky, but a hacker may have, I don't know the exact URL that was used, but a hacker could have registered the domain or could have used the website, something like googleresetpassword.com or something like that, to make it look more convincing that this was a Google password reset link. So John was convinced that this was a authentic Google page, and he told the page that he wanted his new password to be whatever, new password one or something. And then the attacker forwarded that password reset request to Google immediately. So now all three parties have the new password: the hacker, John Podesta, and Google. So John continues transacting business with Gmail just as normal, sending emails, receiving emails, and all that kind of thing. And meanwhile, the attacker is downloading all of the emails that have ever been sent on the account. From there, those emails were divulged to WikiLeaks, who then published them. And it was very, very embarrassing for the Hillary Clinton campaign. Uh, this is the mechanics of how a phishing attack works, and this is also the damage that it can cause when an attack like that is successful. I can't obviously say that this is why she lost the election, but we can all agree that it didn't help. So this is how a phishing attack works, and the lessons that we can learn from this are twofold. One is, if you receive a suspicious email like that, uh, encouraging you to change your password, there's nothing wrong with changing your password. You don't have to click the link in the email, though. You can click a link. You could just go directly to Google's website and uh, reset your password there. The same goes for your bank. You may have received an email that kind of looked like your bank, and it said, click here to log in to check suspicious activity. And if you click that link, you're taken to a page that looks very similar, if not the exact same, as your bank's login website. Just don't click the email. Just don't click the link in the email. Just go directly, open a browser, and then just type in the URL to go directly to that website and log in or reset your password or whatever it is you want to do. And the second is just what am I trying to say? to exercise a healthy dose of skepticism. It's very important that we understand that these type of attacks occur and that we need to be vigilant against them. So I'm going to shift gears on to a more secure means of communicating digitally. And the first one is SSL and TLS. So SSL and TLS are an encrypted protocol that's used to communicate with web servers. When the internet was invented in the 70s, all of the communications that went back and forth between different nodes was in plain text. So when you logged into a website, the text that you received was in plain text, and when you typed in something, that was sent back to the server in plain text. And the problem with that is that it's easy to eavesdrop. And so SSL solves that problem by encrypting the information before it goes in transit so that an eavesdropper can't read the information. SSL and TLS are pretty much interchangeable terms. TLS is sort of SSL is more or less retired. TLS has taken over for it, but people still use the term SSL to mean TLS, so it's fine to use them interchangeably. What does it do? So I kind of just described the secure communication. It makes sure that the information, when it's in transit, can only be read by the two parties at each end of the channel. But the other thing is that it actually authenticates that you are talking to the server that you think you are. So if you open up your web browser and just type in bankofamerica.com, there are ways to trick your browser into connecting to another server that's not owned by Bank of America, and you would not be aware that you're doing it. And SSL prevents that from happening. SSL authenticates that the host that you are talking to is actually bankofamerica.com and not some attacker who's just trying to pretend to be them. So SSL is important because it provides both of those services to you whenever you use it. So it's very important that you verify you have an SSL connection before you send any kind of financial information, any kind of logins, or just any confidential information in general. It's very, very important that you check that you have an SSL connection in place. It's very easy to do. The browsers, all of the major browsers put a little lock icon right here by the URL to let you know that you are connecting over an SSL channel. And in fact, there's been a movement in the browser industry recently to make SSL the default way of communicating over the web. And they're kind of calling out websites that don't use an SSL connection when you're talking to them. And I applaud this. So basically what they're doing is they're making it so that it's more obvious to the user that when you're connected to a website that it's not over an SSL connection. So let me just show you an example of how it looks when you connect to an SSL site. So you can see the lock here. If you click, it says connection is secure. You can actually get more details about the certificate if that interests you. That's available right there. So this little lock icon is what you want to look for. A website that is not secure would be this one right here. Chrome is, again, as I mentioned, is kind of calling out websites that don't do this and being more conspicuous about notifying the user that they are not using a secure form of communication when they're talking to the server. I've heard rumors that they're actually going to even take this a step further and turn this like red or something like that to really make it stand out so that you know that you're not communicating over a secure channel. And I think that's a great idea. I really do think that the web does need to move to make all forms of communication secure because it's just better. It prevents accidental leakage of information that you wouldn't intend. All right. SSL warnings. Sometimes you'll receive this when you browse the web. So this is a website that's set up deliberately to show you what an SSL warning looks like in your browser. So sometimes you'll receive this when you connect to a website. Your connection is not private. Attackers might be trying to steal your information from expire.badssl.com. And then it kind of explains what the problem is with the certificate. In this case, the data is invalid. When you receive this message, it is possible, although unlikely, but it is possible that an attacker is trying to read the information that you are communicating back and forth with the server. And so I encourage you, whenever you receive this message, to not ignore it. Click the back to safety link, and then reach out to whatever service that you're trying to connect to by phone or email or whatever, and ask them what's going on. Because again, it's unlikely, but it is possible that there is some kind of attack that's occurring. There are a lot of reasons that an SSL certificate could fail. For example, this one right here is a expired certificate. So if you own a website and you decide that you want to use SSL, the way that it works is that you purchase an SSL certificate from a third party, and then you take that certificate and you upload it to your server. That certificate's only good for a certain time period. In general, it's a year. If you forget to renew your certificate, or if you just install the new one improperly or something like that, then your users may receive this warning. So in that case, you're not actually connecting to a bad server, but it is a failed certificate for that reason. And there's lots of other reasons that a certificate could fail. If the encryption methods that they're using are out of date, that could be one reason. Sometimes the certificate is actually revoked for certain reasons that if it's suspicious or something along those lines, the certificate authority may actually revoke the certificate. You don't need to worry about any of that though. If you receive this, just reach out to the service and ask them why their website is failing to connect over SSL and try to get that resolved before you continue the communication. Okay, and now I kind of want to shift gears to passwords. So passwords are kind of interesting because they're kind of the bane of the security industry. They really just cause a lot of pain when it comes to keeping information secure. uh, there's been a lot of research actually to replace passwords and try to find something else that people can use in the place of passwords, so that we can, authenticate without using passwords. And there's been a lot of exciting projects that are out there, but so far nothing's really gained traction. Um, the reason that people are trying to replace passwords is because there are so many problems with them. But the two that I really want to highlight are that most of the passwords that people choose are very insecure. And the other is that they reuse the same passwords on website after website. And both of these are really, really bad practices. And so I kind of want to go over why that is and how to avoid that. So when you're choosing a password, it's extremely important that you choose a password that's secure. In general, length is much, much better than complexity. So if you choose a 20 character password, uh, even if it's just all letters, that's way better than a password that's 8 characters and has numbers, letters, and characters and all kinds of, weird characters like that. And the reason is because computers are extremely good at guessing passwords. It's no exaggeration to say that computers can guess passwords at the rate of about 1 million per second. And so whenever you have too short of a password, it's trivially easy for a computer to just run through all of the possible passwords until it reaches that one. Once you get to the length of 12 characters or more, it becomes increasingly difficult and it takes longer and longer for for a computer to guess that password. And so it's important that you choose longer passwords whenever you're creating a password for a website or any kind of service. And then unique passwords. It's very important that you choose unique passwords for every website that you sign up for. And the reason for that is because what can happen is that the password database, the passwords that you use on one service, if that service does not store those passwords securely, then if a hacker breaks into that system, they can download the password database and try those username and password combinations against different websites. So I'll use an example. Ring.com. I think we're all familiar with Ring doorbells. They're the ones with the cameras on them and that sort of thing. And you can pull it up from your phone and do all kinds of neat stuff. They had a password hack in 2019 where hackers took their username and password database and put it on the dark web. What's the dark web? The dark web is a part of the internet where everyone is anonymous. It's extremely difficult to trace the web servers that you're talking to, or even the users that posted on those websites, because everyone is anonymous. And because everyone is anonymous, it brings rise to criminal activity, whether it's purchasing illicit substances or trading hacking tools or that kind of thing. It's very difficult for law enforcement to track those people down in order to prosecute them. So someone broke into the ring.com website and downloaded the username and password database, and they put it on the dark web. And this is a screenshot of that dump. This screenshot is heavily redacted, but you can kind of make it out here that this column right here is the email address and the passwords that were used for these people's accounts. It is very, very easy for a hacker to use this information to write a script to then try these username and password combinations against Google or against your bank or anything like that to try to break into another account that's not even related to ring.com. So that's why it's very, very important to use a unique password on every single service that you sign up for, because if that password is leaked to somebody, it will only work on that one website. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, Mike, you're telling me I need to create 12 character passwords and they need to be unique on every website. How in the world do I keep track of all of that? I mean, I'm only a person. I've only got a limited amount of time. How do I choose secure passwords for every single website? And there's a lot of ways to do that. And I just want to give you two. One of the most important things you could do is to use a password manager. The most famous or the most well-known one, I guess I should say, is LastPass, LASTPASS.com. It's a website that allows you to create a password vault that can only be read by you. They can't even read it to keep all of your passwords safe. And then the second one is to create what's called a passphrase. So let's see here. I'm actually going to jump into the demo of LastPass first, and then I'll circle back to a passphrase. So LastPass is a tool that has two ways to access it. The first is you can just go to lastpass.com and then just log in here. And you can access your password vault that way. The other way is that you can install a browser plugin. And that will allow you to access it that way. The browser plugin will do a lot of neat things where it will actually pop up every time you visit a website that has, for which it has a password on file for, so that you don't even have to go to LastPass to pull that information in. And I'll show you that in just one second. So which one should you use? It kind of depends. My advice would be to use the browser extension on any computer that you own. So if you own your laptop or your work computer or whatever, it's okay to use LastPass for that. If you're visiting a hotel and you're using the computer that's in the lobby, the business center or whatever it's called, obviously you'd want to use the website one instead of installing the extension on their computer. You just don't know what's going on in that thing. So using the website for that would be a good advice. I'd like to show you how LastPass works briefly. So this is a website that doesn't protect anything. This is just a demo website with a login page and a sign up, and you could just put in anything here and it'll let you log in, but it's good enough to kind of show you how it works. So I'm going to create an account, and because I've run through this demo before, it's already popping me up, but I'm gonna pretend that we've never been to this website before. And I'm gonna say my username is gonna be John Doe at example.com. What's nice about LastPass is that you get these little icons at the end of the input box that can give you a little assist. So in this case, it'll actually choose a secure password for you, so you don't have to think of one. So you can refresh it if you don't like it. If you'd like to make it longer or shorter, you can adjust the length, you can adjust the characters that are in it. It gives you lots of options in order to choose a secure password for this website. Once you're happy with it, you could just click Fill Password, accept the terms and conditions, and then after you've completed the sign up form, you get this little message up here saying, would you like to add this website that you just signed up for to LastPass? And so let's say add, and it's been added. So now you may have to refresh the page to see it, but if I click John Doe, I can now see the password and the login that I've just created. So now when I come back to here, it's saying that I have two accounts. That's why there's the little 2 right there. So it's allowing me to choose which one I want to log in as. So I'm just going to click on the one that I just created, and I click login, and it lets me in. It's very, very simple. It's a great way to manage passwords. It even assists you in choosing a secure password so that you don't have to think of one yourself or remember it, and it will keep it secure for you. A couple of other features that I want to show you about LastPass. This is especially helpful if you're using the web version versus the extension. If for some reason you need to copy the password, the easiest way to do that is just to find the entry that, the entry for the website, and then right click on it and click copy password, and that will put the password in your clipboard so that you can paste it into the login form. That's really helpful if you're using it on just the web version of it. Another feature that's really nice is that you can share passwords with other people who have LastPass accounts. When I was doing independent consulting and expenses were tight, this was one way that I would send clients login informations to the services that I created for them. So if this was a login to some kind of tool that I had built for them, then what I could do is I could first reach out to them and say, hey, can you sign up for LastPass.com? Just create an account and then just send me the email address that you've used to create that account. So they would do that and they come back. And then I'd click this share button. And then you can type in their email address and click share. I meant to click allow recipient to view password. I meant to do that, but yeah, in normal circumstances, you would do that. Once you do that, the person receives an email address saying Mike Devlin has shared a password with you. Log into LastPass to view it, and then they can log in and they can see the password. That's a much more secure way to send login credentials than just over email. It's not the most professional way. There are ways to send secure messages. There are specific services set up for that, but this is a way that you can do it for free if you're looking to, for a way to cut costs. And it's just kind of a nice feature within LastPass. Okay, so you're thinking, aha, okay, yeah, this is great, but the problem with this is that LastPass itself requires a password, and you're telling me it still needs to be 12 characters and secure and all of that kind of stuff. How do I choose a password for LastPass that I can remember but still is secure? And that's where passphrases come in. So a passphrase is simply 4 or more words that you put together to form just some kind of clause or just I wouldn't say a sentence, but just some sort of a phrase that you can use in place of your password. So this is one that I just generated before this presentation, outside when sustainable English. It's 4 random English words. It doesn't even have to be English. You could use foreign words if you're, bilingual. But preferably ones that don't form any kind of cohesive sentence. So these are just 4 very random words that you could use and use that for authenticating a website. It helps when you generate these, if the phrase puts an image in your mind. So if you kind of picture just kind of assign some kind of picture in your head of what this passphrase might look like. Maybe you would picture somebody standing out in your backyard and using sustainable English or something. I don't know, whatever that means, big words or, whatever. If you can remember that image, it becomes easier to remember the passphrase. There's a website called Use a Passphrase, which actually can assist you in creating these passphrases. So this is one that just loaded when I loaded the website, Unworthy Sneaking Respect Datebook. And what's kind of neat about this is it actually shows you the approximate time that it would take a computer to guess this password if you used it on a website. So in this case, it's 269 million centuries, which is about 27 billion years. I think the sun is going to burn out of fuel before 27 billion years. Like, seriously, I think that exceeds the life expectancy of the sun. A computer is not going to guess this password. It's just, it's not going to happen. And so, this is using when they're calculating how long it's going to take, they're using the most up-to-date calculations for how many guesses a computer can perform in a single second to create this calculation. So if you use something like, I don't know, dog, cat, 1, 2, 3, like really it takes 1 second for a computer to guess that. And that's a 6, 7, 8, 9, 9-character password. That's shows you the inefficiency of these types of passwords. Even if you like replaced these with like that, or a 0 or something like that, it brings it up to 2 seconds. The complexity really doesn't help you in this scenario. Really, the only thing that'll help you is the length. And so I encourage you to choose long passwords whenever you have to use a password that you can't keep in some kind of password manager. Passphrases are a great way to do that because they're generally memorable and they're very, very secure. If you want to throw in some numbers and some symbols in there, go for it. That'll even make, that's even better. But generally a passphrase is probably considered sufficient enough. Okay, I already did that. Multi-factor authentication. So what multi-factor authentication is a form of authentication that generally sits on top of passwords. Just in a generic sense, what multi-factor authentication is using more than one method to authenticate to a service. And typically, the authentication methods fall under three categories. One is something you know, something you are, and something you have. So something you know would be something like a password or a PIN number or just something like that. Something you are would be biometrics, so a fingerprint reader or facial recognition or even like a retinal scan or something along those lines. Those would be something that you are. And then something you have in general, those are like a text message or some banks will actually issue you a little dongle that generates a new number, a new six-digit number every 30 seconds. That's something that you have. Text messages fall under that. Those apps where they send you a push notification, that would also fall under that. Those are all something that you have in terms of multi-factor authentication. It's also called two-factor authentication or MFA. All of them refer to the same thing. Why do we need it? And the reason is because passwords are so ineffective at keeping services safe for all of the reasons that I was describing. People tend to reuse the same passwords and they tend to choose really insecure passwords. And so multi-factor authentication makes it more difficult to access a service if you are not the authenticated person. Types I just described. So in general, what I recommend is that you enable multi-factor authentication if it is available for any service that you are registering for. I prefer the ones that either send you a push notification or have an app that generates a new number every 6 digits. I prefer those forms over the text message based one. And I'll go over the reasons for that in a moment. But in general, those forms are more secure. The weaknesses are multi-factor authentication. That's kind of the reasons that I prefer the app over a text message. So there's two ways that multi-factor authentication can be defeated. Two main ways that I want to bring to your attention. The first is called SIM swapping. So if you have an account with your bank and your bank requires to send you a 6-digit PIN number to your phone by text message when you log in, so you've got multi-factor authentication set up. The problem with that is that a hacker can do what's called a SIM swap in order to basically redirect all of your text messages to them. So the way that this would work is that if a hacker figured out your username and password for a bank or just any kind of service, they would then reach the screen where it says, okay, we're about to send you a 6-digit number to your phone, please type it in this input box. So what they'll do is that they'll call your phone company and pretend to be you and ask to have another SIM number attached to your account. So they might say, hi, my name is Mike Devlin, and unfortunately I left my phone in a taxi last night, but I do happen to have another one, so I'd like to use that one. Here's the new SIM number for it. If they're convincing enough and they manage to convince the phone company to swap the SIM number for their SIM number for the device that they're holding, then all of the text messages that were intended for you would then go to them. So then they press the button on the website to get the 6-digit code, it gets sent to their phone, they enter it in, and then they have access to your account. The other one is through phone scams. These involve a attacker calling you and pretending to be your bank and convincing you to give up that 6-digit code. So the way that this would work is that a person, you would receive a phone call, you'd look at the caller ID, and it may even be the caller ID for your bank. You may have it in your phone for some reason. So the caller ID matches your bank, and you pick up the phone, and a person on the other end says, "Hi, this is so and so from First Bank of Austin or whatever. We've detected some suspicious activity on your account and we'd like to go over it with you." And you say, "Oh, wow, suspicious activity. Yes, let's discuss it." And the person says, "Well, in order to authenticate that you are Mike Devlin, I'm going to send a text message with a 6-digit code. I need you to read that off to me." And that's the thing that they're asking you to read off of your phone is actually the 6-digit code that they're going to use to log into your account. So it's very important that if you receive a call like this to just hang up and call the bank directly. Criminals have gotten very, very good at this. They've used caller ID spoofing to their advantage in order to convince you that they are who they say they are. And there's even ways that they can use caller ID spoofing to retrieve your last 3 transactions from your financial institution using your bank's phone service. And so they can read those 3 transactions off to you to even make themselves sound more convincing that they are a representative from your bank. I haven't actually heard this happening in a commercial setting, but I have heard a lot of cases of this recently, particularly because of coronavirus, because the customer service lines for banks are jammed right now with people trying to call in, renegotiate their mortgage, or explain why their car payment's going to be late or whatever. And so it's very hard to reach a customer service person if this sort of thing happens to you. I know I'm running over on time. This is actually the last slide right here. So I just wanted to circle back to the takeaways for this talk. I know I threw a lot of information at you, and so I just want to kind of reiterate the 3 things that I brought up at the beginning. The first is to choose strong, unique passwords. They will keep you safe if the password database that you use or the website that you use is hacked and they download your passwords. They can't use those on other sites, and it also makes it more difficult to guess. Use 2-factor authentication whenever possible. Again, I prefer the phone app-based ones. But if they don't offer that, the text message one is fine. It's way better than nothing. It's fine. Go ahead and sign up for that. And finally is to exercise a healthy dose of skepticism. Be very wary and cautious of the emails that you receive because it's very, very easy to make a person sound like they're someone else or some kind of trusted party. So any kind of email that you receive, turn a skeptical eye to it to avoid being duped. And I'm over on time, so am I allowed to accept questions, or what do we do from here?
So we got some questions. Thank you. That was very great. Very good information. We do have a couple questions. I can go ahead and just send them to you though, and you can follow up with the person that asked them. Yeah, but we do have a session coming up here soon, so we are gonna have to end it, unfortunately.
Okay, I apologize for running over.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks, Mike. We really appreciate it. And thanks again to IIT's lead underwriters. Just a quick reminder before we end, at 2:30 today, there will be a virtual celebration for the Elite Texas Feeding Texas Community Service Project. If you donated, I encourage you to join. If you didn't receive the registration link to join, please go to iiat.org/InsureCon and click on the registration button for the Community Service Project. Virtual InsureCon will continue next Thursday starting at 10 a.m. with 4 breakout webinars presented by Steve McKee. In each of the webinars, Steve will explore one of the 4 phases of the disruption cycle: acceleration, maturation, saturation, and commoditization. You'll want to attend, especially if you joined Steve's keynote last week. There's still time to register for next Thursday's session, so go to iit.org/InsureCon and click on the registration buttons located next to the sessions that you want to attend. I hope you'll join us again next week, and thank you again. Have a great day.